Ancient civilizations have a way of predicting our future, Andrew, and today we're exploring how two kingdoms collapsed in ways that feel frighteningly familiar to modern geopolitics.
That's quite a statement, Pappy. What makes you draw those parallels?
Well, imagine watching a superpower slowly crumble from within. That's exactly what we see in Second Kings. You've got these two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, dealing with corruption, failed reforms, and ignored warnings from experts.
Hmm, sounds eerily similar to some headlines we see today, but what specifically caused their downfall?
So here's what's fascinating. It wasn't just one thing. You've got these cycles of corrupt leadership where each new administration seems to make things worse than the last. And what's really striking is how the text documents this slow erosion of social institutions.
That reminds me of how historians talk about the fall of other major empires. It's rarely one dramatic moment, but rather a series of compounding failures.
Exactly. And what's wild is how the story starts with this absolutely cinematic scene, the prophet Elijah literally ascending to heaven in a chariot of fire. It's like the text is saying, pay attention. What follows is important.
That must have been quite a sight. What happens after that dramatic opening?
Well, his successor, Elisha, steps into this incredibly volatile situation. And here's what's fascinating. He becomes like this ancient version of an investigative journalist, speaking truth to power and exposing corruption,
The way you're describing it, it sounds more like a political thriller than a religious text.
right? And get this, there's this amazing story about Naaman, this powerful foreign military commander who has to learn humility to be healed. It's like watching a modern diplomatic crisis unfold.
That's such an interesting parallel. How does that situation resolve?
So Naaman initially gets super offended because the solution seems too simple. Just washing the Jordan River 7 times. It's his servants who finally convince him to put aside his pride and just try it.
Well, that's a powerful lesson about how sometimes the simplest solutions are the hardest to accept.
And you know what's really interesting? The text keeps showing how these personal stories connect to larger national issues. Like there's this wealthy woman who helps Alicia, and her story becomes this thread that weaves through multiple major political events.
So it's showing how individual actions can have broader societal impacts.
Exactly. But then, and this is where it gets really relevant to today, we start seeing how both kingdoms begin to unravel. Israel falls first, and you'd think Judah would learn from watching their neighbor collapse, right?
Let me guess, they don't?
Well, they try. That's what's so heartbreaking. You've got these reform minded leaders like Hezekiah and Josiah who actually implement some serious changes, but it's like trying to patch a sinking ship. The reforms come too late and don't go deep enough.
That sounds like a pattern we see repeated throughout history. Reforms that look good on paper but don't address the underlying problems.
And here's what's really chilling, the text is super clear about how they had multiple warnings. They had these prophets basically saying, look, if you continue down this path, here's exactly what's going to happen.
Just like modern experts warning about climate change or economic instability.
Yeah, and just like today, those warnings get ignored or dismissed until it's too late. The Assyrians eventually come in and completely destroy the northern kingdom of Israel.
That must have been devastating for the region.
Absolutely devastating. And then Judah manages to hold on for a while longer, but eventually falls to Babylon. The temple gets destroyed. Jerusalem is razed, and most of the population is carried into exile.
Though I've heard the text doesn't end completely hopelessly.
That's one of the most fascinating aspects. Even after all that destruction, the final scene shows one of Judah's former kings being released from prison in Babylon. It's like this tiny glimmer of hope in the darkness.
So, what's the big takeaway for modern readers?
Well, I think it's this sobering reminder that no society is too big to fail, but it's also showing how reform is possible, how individual actions matter, and how even in the darkest moments, there's always potential for renewal.
That's quite a relevant message for our current global situation, Pappy.
And maybe that's why this ancient text still resonates, Andrew, because it's not just recording history, it's showing patterns that keep repeating. The question is, will we learn from them?